Good morning. Sorry for the delay in videos. We got Kona fixed on Monday, so it's been a very weird couple of days of trying to keep her cool, still, not playing, which is very difficult. But she's doing well, healing well, so doing good there. Creed is scheduled for the beginning of next month, so that should help him and his energetic self. And it rained for about 24 or 36 hours or something like that. It was a lot. So that is what has been happening here. We're getting a lot of eggs. But I wanted to kind of talk about, if the sun will cooperate with me here, while we do morning chores, I wanted to talk about how we can set our yard up to work for us. So the idea is to, if you're into this kind of lifestyle, is to try and make as much as you can for yourself. So that could possibly be a garden, that could be fruit and berry bushes and trees, possibly chickens. If you have quite the yard, that could be cows, sheep, goats, dairy, meat, all of the above. So I wanted to kind of talk with you about, if you haven't done this yet, this isn't something that you've even remotely started, or maybe you have kind of started, but you're a little apprehensive about where to go from here. The fruit bush and the fruit tree would be my first. That's what I would tell you to start with. That would be my recommendation, only because that stuff, you buy it, you get it out of the way, and by the time you figure out gardening, or you figure out chickens or something else, your fruit trees are like producing. So fruit trees and bushes can take anywhere from a year, 2 years, 3 years to start producing an actual good amount of produce, I guess I would call it. So you plant an orchard and berry bushes, then you have a couple of years. You still, you gotta water them, make sure, check on them. But you basically, they're growing root systems and such, and they're kind of doing their own thing to produce for you. While that's happening, you can then start your hand at gardening and do research on chickens. You have your first year of gardening, you learn a lot, you figure out what works, you figure out what doesn't work, you figure out species of beans that work in your area, you figure out all kinds of stuff. You try gardening, half of it works. The next year, you figure out more gardening, and you've done research in the winter about chickens, so you get some laying chickens. Now, year 3, harvest comes around, you have more of a garden harvest, you have an entire orchard and berry harvest, and now you also have chicken eggs coming in. That's one way of doing it if all those things are possible for you in your yard, in your area. Perennials are just a good way. Perennials meaning things you plant once that produce multiple times. So perennials are just a good way of setting it, forgetting it, and then all of a sudden you have a ton of fruit and you have the ability to make jams and all this stuff. So, like I said, year one, I would start doing research on everything you can do, everything you want to do, and plant some perennials that work in your area. So we live in Southwest Missouri, which means citrus doesn't really work for us. So I wouldn't plant a citrus tree. However, you wouldn't know that unless you researched it, or talked to some people in your area that have tried it. Another thing that we have talked to people about that doesn't work down here that I was shocked by is peach trees. In Southwest Missouri, peach trees will grow. However, we have a tendency to get some late frosts, and a peach tree will bud, and then once it frosts, it's done. So if it starts to bud and then frosts too quickly, that peach tree can die. So that's something I didn't know that talking to the locals made me aware of. So year one, lots of research and plant perennials. Year two, I would say get a garden going. Most people can have some kind of vegetable garden or perennial vegetables such as asparagus. Is asparagus the only real perennial vegetable? I think it might be. I don't know. Asparagus is a pretty good perennial vegetable, and it doesn't look normal. Somebody that's looking for a vegetable garden won't see asparagus and go, they have a vegetable garden and they're not supposed to. So that's a good one. Perennials, year one, and research. Year two, vegetable garden and more research. So you always want to be researching like the next thing or what didn't work and what will work. Another thing that a lot of people don't do is they don't research what did work for them. That is something that I get caught with all the time, is questions about, I'm bringing zucchini to something to trade with other people, and other people's zucchini didn't work. They want to know why mine did. So I should be researching a little bit better of, I did this, what did you do? Well, that could be a reason. Or I did, I planted it here instead of here, or I planted it next to this vegetable, not the other vegetable that you planted it next to. So that's something that a lot of people don't do, and they get caught with those questions. Why did yours work and mine didn't? Or what did I do wrong? Then year three, I would continue to do research and go on to the next thing you wanted. So whether that be chickens, whether that be, you can't have any agricultural critters. So maybe your research from year 2 to 3 was butchers in the area or ranchers that will let you buy a whole cow. Or your research started as, how big of a freezer do I need to fit a whole cow? And then you researched the cuts on a cow so that you knew what kind of cuts you wanted, where you got your cow from. Some butchers will do it themselves. They will get a hold of a rancher. They have a rancher that they get a hold of, and they'll get you a whole cow. Some, you have to find the rancher takes it to the processor, and then you get in touch with the butcher, and you were the middleman the whole way. Oops. So there's multiple avenues, there's multiple things you can research, but you need to constantly be improving on what you're doing. So year 3, you're in the talks with a rancher or a butcher, and you're getting a whole cow or a pig or whatever it is. And you're also now have a harvest in your vegetable garden that's better than the first year you did it. And you also now all of a sudden have all of this fruit. And after planting all of that fruit, in your years of research, it would have been a good idea to research how to make jams or jellies or preserves or juices or whatever it is that you like. You plant a bunch of apple trees, you're going to want apples, you're going to want to make maybe like can or jar up some apple pie filling. Maybe you make applesauce. Maybe you dehydrate apple slices so that kids have like apple chips and they're not eating regular chips, or they're not eating store-bought apple chips that have extra sugar in them. All of these things make your orchard more fruitful because you're able to use more of it. A lot of people will use like the part of the apple that you eat, they'll use that for certain things such as apple filling, apple pie filling, or applesauce or something. And then they'll actually take the core and they'll juice the core so that you're using all of the cores, but they don't really want that much apple juice. So they just use the cores, then they use everything. So there's lots of things you can do. Elderberry has some kind of natural, good qualities to them. You can actually dehydrate or freeze dry that, make it into a powder, and you can put it in your drinks and give yourself an elderberry supplement or anything like that. Anything you want to do, you can research these things. There's lots of things you can do with each thing. But you want to make sure that you're using all of it. I mean, you can pay anywhere from $20, $30 to $100 for a tree. So you want to make sure you get as much out of it as you can. You're going to need to make sure that the pests stay away from your berries. That is why I personally like to use thorned bushes. I think they were designed for thorns because they were designed to try to stay alive, and the fruit is actually what has the seed in it so that they can reproduce. So I think thorns are kind of just in general a good idea. It hurts more, I can tell you that, but I think it makes for a better quality plant. And if you're looking for non-GMO and more natural heirloom, they're gonna have the thorns. I also prefer something that was grown or something that I know works here. If you have native, like we have wild blackberries around here. If you can get some of them wild blackberries, you know those grow around here. They've been growing around here. They're going to be a more hardy plant. This is all stuff you have to find in your research and you have to find for your area. I can talk until I'm blue in the face about what works for me, but if you're up north or you're even farther south than I am, then what I'm telling you isn't gonna do you any good. That's why I try to stay away from what kinds of things I planted and just tell you I grew beans. Instead of telling you I grew provider beans or dragon's tongue or something like that, I just try to tell you that we grew beans because provider beans might not work for you. Also, Honeycrisp apples may not work for you, or the type of asparagus that I planted may not work for you. So there's things that I don't want to confuse you and get you buying a certain kind that worked well for me that just doesn't work for you in your area. I kind of did things backwards, but I needed a fence before I could put in bushes and trees because we have a lot of deer around here. Just talked to a guy this morning, a neighbor, he saw 9 deer this morning, and he lives about 2 blocks, whatever you want to call a block, away from us. So we have a lot of deer. We have dogs that help us keep those things away, but still they're around, and our dogs are those kinds of dogs that like in of doors, so they're not out here all the time, so they're pretty protective though. Gotta give them that. These two have been play fighting more. Kona, please don't get involved. Kona! She is so done with being babied and being told she can't do anything. I think Creed is finally figuring out his place in all of this. But that's what I wanted to talk about. There's lots of questions out there about what order to do things in and how to get the most out of it, and you really got to do what works for you. I know there's a lot of places that don't allow chickens, or you might not have enough area for a cow or what have you. So you gotta really think and do research and process what's gonna work for you, what works in your area, and what you have the space for. That really is a big deal too. I put in raspberry bushes, gooseberry bushes, some trees. Knowing how far apart to put those really puts into perspective how many you can actually have. So we have basically 300 feet by 300 feet. We got about 2 acres. 2 and whatever acres. So every 30 feet, I can put a tree. Well, that means I can only have like 40 trees. And then that doesn't include the space that was taken up by a gate or the space taken up by something that's already there. You got to be aware of power lines. There's a lot of things that you have to be aware of. You have to be aware of your septic system. So I can't put just bushes anywhere. I got to be careful where I'm putting trees in relation to power lines or buried power, gas lines, anything like that. I also have to be cautious of my septic system. Also, I would be cautious of any future things you want to do. So we have a hill. I mean, we live on a hill, but we have a pretty good hill on our hill that has the potential, if we wanted to put in a root cellar or a storm shelter. If I put a giant tree on that hill, you're gonna run into roots, which is a bad thing for anything you're building, but also a bad thing for that tree. If you're gonna cut into those roots, you could possibly kill the tree. And like I said, you're gonna pay anywhere between $20 and $100 for that tree. That's an investment. And if you can get a good return on your investment of 8 years or whatever it is of harvest off of that tree, that brings that investment per year down to something that you're actually going to get your money back fairly quickly. So making sure that you do ample research, and I know I've said research so many times, and I get awfully sick of research myself. I think Big K is the only one that really likes research on this planet, and he does really, really well. But it takes so much time, and for me, writing it down and looking at it and going to multiple sites helps me, but it also can confuse you. So that's what I have to do. Big K writes everything down, and I think he over-researches. Ugh. Trying to cut my caffeine back again. I keep cutting it back, and I keep finding more and more things wrong with the caffeine that I use, and so. But, yeah. Research is key in this lifestyle. It's a pain in the butt, I know. And if you can talk to local people, it makes it a little easier. It gets rid of the mundane, looking it up, reading it, writing it down. There are people that have done this that know in your area. I'm sure of it. But we did it wrong. I did it wrong. I did it in the order I could do it, and not in the order that I really would have liked to do it. But it is what it is. We're doing it. We're learning. Our bushes and tree look great. I need to get more. I just haven't been back to town. That town specifically. There's one town that had what I wanted. So we'll get more put in, and hopefully we will get a good harvest on this stuff. If y'all wouldn't mind liking, sharing, subscribing, hitting that little bell notification button thing down there, just tap that like button, hit the little thumbs up. It doesn't need to be hit real hard. And if you could do it an odd number of times, never do it an even number of times. Always an odd number of times. We'd appreciate it. All of us would appreciate you. Where'd you go? I had you. There she is. Always grabbing something that's not a dog toy. We appreciate y'all.